OET Writing, 10 Common Mistakes and Solutions. The OET Writing section can be quite challenging. After more than 12 years teaching OET preparation, I'm going to be discussing 10 of the most common mistakes I've found and provide simple solutions. We are going to cover number 1, not understanding the task, number 2, content, number 3, adding irrelevant information, number 4, planning and layout, number 5, paragraphing, number 6, language skills, number 7, British English versus American English, number 8, not checking your writing, number 9, repetition, and finally, number 10, not understanding the criteria. So let's start with number 1, not understanding the task. There are 2 common mistakes. Number 1, the letter does not address or complete the task. And number 2, the purpose is misunderstood. If you do not follow the instructions given in the writing task, for example, you write an update letter when it should be a referral, or you do not make it clear what the patient needs and why, you have probably misinterpreted the case notes. And unfortunately, your letter is likely to not complete the task completely. There are 4 solutions. Number 1, read the writing task in the case notes very carefully. Number 2, clarify what is the situation. Number 3, consider who are you writing to and why. And number 4, provide details to support the reason why you're writing the letter. So let's move on to content. There are 2 common mistakes here. Important details and information are left out. And number 2, the purpose for writing the letter is misunderstood. So appropriate, relevant information is not included. The writing assessment criteria states that you need to sufficiently expand on the purpose. This means that you need to include all relevant and semi-relevant information that's going to help the reader to be able to continue the care of the patient and understand the situation. There are 3 solutions. Number 1, you need to include information that will help the reader to continue the care of the patient. This is most likely going to be all the relevant information. Number 2, add any additional information that the reader may find useful. This is going to be semi-relevant information. And number 3, you need to consider, if you were the reader, what information would you want to know and why, and also in what order. So let's move on now to number 3, adding irrelevant information. Healthcare professionals are very busy people. They don't want to be reading essay-style letters. Your letter should clearly state what the issue is in a summarized way. If you add irrelevant information, it is going to make your letters unnecessarily long, and it also has the potential to distract the reader from locating the most important information. There are 3 common issues here. Number 1, irrelevant information is included that can distract the reader. Number 2, too much focus on past symptoms rather than current. And number 3, unnecessary lengthy letters due to irrelevant information being added. The solutions: number 1, only include details that support the purpose of the letter. Number 2, ask yourself, would the reader find the information useful? If your answer is no, do not include this information. So now let's move on to number 4, planning and layout. If you have ever watched a video by OET Official or E2, you will have seen that they often talk about the importance of planning. If you don't plan your letter before starting to write, endless errors could occur, such as information would be in the wrong order, you may leave out important information, you could end up with repetition, and so many other issues could happen. It is very important that you take the time to plan your letter before you start to write. There are 4 main issues. Number 1, unorganized information causes confusion when reading. Number 2, The content does not follow a logical order. Number 3, important information is not clearly highlighted for the reader to find easily. And number 4, there are no lines or spaces between paragraphs or different types of information. There are 3 solutions. Number 1, and probably one of the most important, you need to spend at least 5 to 10 minutes selecting all the information you need to include in your letter and drafting a plan. Number 2, organize your paragraphs in a logical order. And number 3, think about what information the reader needs to know and in what order. Leave line spaces between each paragraph. Now let's look at the 5th common mistake, paragraphing. There are 4 common mistakes. Number 1, paragraphs tend to be too long. Number 2, they contain too many different kinds of information. Number 3, again, they are not in a logical order. And number 4, it's difficult for the reader to find or retrieve information, especially if it's important. So there are 4 solutions. Number 1, each paragraph should have a subject or a theme. Number 2, use introductory sentences at the beginning of each paragraph to initially help identify the content. And number 3, do not have lengthy paragraphs. And finally, number 4, organize your paragraphs in a logical order. Okay, so how are you doing so far? Have you identified any of the mistakes that have been mentioned so far? All right, let's move on to number 6, language skills. These carry a heavy point value, so it's very important to make sure that you demonstrate a good academic level. 4 common mistakes are: number 1, grammatical errors. Number 2, sentences are too long with no variety of sentence structure. Number 3, details are copied directly from the case notes with no paraphrasing. And number 4, punctuation such as full stops and commas are forgotten. There are 3 solutions. Number 1, search the internet for grammar practice sites and revisit any problematic areas. Number 2, surround yourself with medical English podcasts, articles and documentaries. The Australian Medical Journal is a very good place to start, followed by TED Talks. And number 3, pay attention to your writing. Check that punctuation, including full stops, commas, capital letters, are used correctly. OET is an international exam. What that means is that they accept 2 different language styles. They are British English and American English. 2 of the most common mistakes. Number 1, the 2 different languages are mixed in the same letter. And number 2, there is often confusion as to when or when not use the full stop for abbreviations such as Mr., Mrs., Miss and Doctor. So there are 2 solutions. Number 1, you need to select either British English or American English. And number 2, you need to be consistent. Whichever language style you choose, you need to learn it and make sure that you keep that style throughout your letter. Okay, number 8, not checking your writing. Under exam conditions, you have many different elements to be thinking about, so it's quite normal to make mistakes. It is really important that you learn how to time manage so that you have 1 or 2 minutes at the end to check your letter before your time runs out. You'll be amazed at how many mistakes you find. There are 3 common mistakes. Number 1, your letter contains many avoidable errors. Number 2, lack of time management does not allow for checking. And number 3, poor planning can cause unnecessary errors that will cause significant penalties or impact your score if not corrected. So there are 3 solutions. Number 1, learn to time manage. Give yourself time to be able to check your letter before your time runs out. Number 2, Practice writing letters under the time limitations. And number 3, learn how to quickly identify mistakes and correct them. Well, we're almost there, just 2 more to go. So let's move on to repetition. There are 3 common errors. Number 1, overusing the same vocabulary throughout your letter, not demonstrating a rich and flexible vocabulary range. Number 2, duplication of the same ideas in different paragraphs. And number 3, repeating content taken directly from the case notes. This is often as a result of no paraphrasing. So there are 4 solutions. Number 1, use alternative words, synonyms, demonstrate a good range of vocabulary. Number 2, paraphrase where possible to avoid repeating the same words in the case notes. Number 3, quite often the case notes are bullet pointed or partial sentences, so they are not grammatically correct. Try write each sentence with a different structure. Okay, so finally, probably the most common mistake that is made is not understanding the assessment criteria. OET has given you 6 criteria for the writing section. In order to achieve your required score, you have to demonstrate a certain level of skills for each. If you do not know the criteria, how will you know what to put into your letter in order to achieve your band level? There are 3 common mistakes. Number 1, not being able to demonstrate the skills due to not being familiar with the criteria. Number 2, not understanding what is being assessed in order to achieve your required band level. And number 3, letters do not match or demonstrate the necessary criteria. So there are 3 solutions. Number 1, you need to read and familiarize yourself with the assessment criteria repeatedly until it is clear what you need to do. Understand how to apply the criteria to maximize your score. And number 2, if you want to pass the writing section, it is fundamentally important that you know what these criteria are and how to apply them in your letter. So how many of these mistakes were you able to identify with? I hope this video has provided you with information that can help to correct any mistakes that you are making. Please don't forget, understanding your assessment criteria is the key to successfully passing the OET writing section. So until next time, keep practicing and keep studying.
Are you ready to take the exam? Are you confident to be able to pass any letter type that you may be given? Have you considered a writing feedback service?